Daniel Carter stood at the edge of his field, staring at land that had once pulsed with life. Rows of soil stretched before him, but instead of green stalks rising in the breeze, the earth lay cracked and thirsty, pale as ash. The drought had been merciless. Weeks without rain had stripped the vitality from his corn, wheat, and soy. Even the cattle looked gaunt, their ribs showing through worn hides. This farm wasn't just his work. It was his inheritance, his identity. His grandfather had broken this soil with his own hands. His father had expanded it. And now Daniel was supposed to preserve it for his daughter. But the weight of responsibility pressed harder each day. Bank notices piled on the kitchen table. Machinery rusted in the shed, waiting for repairs he couldn't afford. Every morning he rose before dawn, and every night he stumbled in after dark, yet the harder he worked, the further hope seemed to drift. Grace, his 17-year-old daughter, reminded him daily to hold on to faith. She carried the same spark his late wife once had, a light that sometimes made Daniel feel his wife was still with them. But faith didn't stop crops from dying. He had no answers, only worries-on pride stitched deep into his bones. Asking for help felt like betraying everything his family had stood for, and yet, as he looked over the barren acres, a whisper in his heart told him pride alone wouldn't save the farm. One sweltering afternoon, while mending a fence, his neighbor Martha hurried across the road, breathless, straw hat slipping from her head. "Daniel, did you hear the news?" He straightened, wiping sweat from his brow. "What news?" "The President and First Lady are coming here to meet with farmers hit hardest by the drought." Daniel shook his head. "And what good will that do?" Another speech. Another promise. Martha frowned. "Don't be so bitter. Maybe this time's different. Maybe they'll bring real help." He leaned against the post, his expression firm. Martha, politicians have been promising help for decades. But where are they when the bills come due? When the fields fail? She sighed, softer now. "Daniel, you've carried this farm alone since your wife passed. Don't you think maybe, just maybe, you deserve a break? At least hear them out." Daniel didn't answer. Pride bristled, but he couldn't deny her words, stung with truth. His daughter deserved more than to watch him wither under failure. All he said was, "We'll see." That evening, Grace found him on the porch as the sun dipped low. Her golden hair glowed in the fading light. Mrs. Miller said, "The President's coming," she said. "So I've been told." Her eyes shone. "Dad, this could be our chance. Maybe he'll listen. Maybe something good will come." Daniel frowned, hands folded rough and calloused in his lap. "We don't need handouts. We work for what we have. That's how it's always been." Grace sat beside him, placing her hand gently on his arm. "Sometimes strength isn't refusing help, Dad. Sometimes real strength is knowing when to accept it." The words pierced him. They echoed his late wife's wisdom. He wanted to believe Grace's hope, but years of disappointment had hardened him. Still, something shifted inside, quietly, like a seed stirring in dry earth. The morning of the visit arrived. Town buzzed with rare energy. Families lined the gravel road to the community barn. Children waved small flags. Farmers who seldom left their land gathered shoulder to shoulder. Daniel hadn't wanted to come, but Grace had begged. "Please, Dad, just listen." Reluctantly, he agreed. He wore his worn boots and faded flannel, refusing to dress for show. Inside, anticipation crackled. Camera crews hovered. Reporters scribbled. Everyone knew the visit was as much about headlines as hardship. Daniel kept to the back, arms crossed. Grace pushed closer to the front, her bright smile easing the tension around her. When sirens blared and black SUVs rolled up, the barn erupted in cheers. Donald Trump entered, waving confidently, Melania beside him with quiet poise. Daniel's chest tightened. He respected the office, but memories of empty promises ran deep. Still, he couldn't ignore the flicker of hope in Grace's eyes. Trump took the stage, his voice booming. "Farmers are the backbone of this country. Without you, America doesn't eat. Without you, there is no pride, no future." Applause thundered. Daniel stayed still, jaw set. "We know the drought has hit you hard. We know the banks are pressuring you, but we are here to help. Relief programs, subsidies, resources. We're putting farmers first. We won't let you down." The crowd roared. Daniel muttered under his breath. "Promises don't put food on the table." Grace nudged him. "Dad," at least he came. That means something. Daniel didn't answer, but he listened closer than he wanted to admit. Then Melania stepped forward. Her voice was calm, steady, almost tender. I look at you and I see strength. Behind every farm is sacrifice. Behind every harvest is unseen work. You are not forgotten. Her words struck Daniel differently. She spoke not like a politician, but like someone who understood the quiet ache of families who rose before dawn, who lived with dirt under their fingernails, who took pride in coaxing life from soil. His arms dropped slowly from their rigid fold. For the first time, he felt truly seen. Grace whispered, "She understands, Dad. Don't you feel it?" Daniel said nothing, but his heart softened. After the speeches, the couple moved through the crowd. To Daniel's dismay, they walked straight toward him. Trump extended a hand. "Sir, what's your name?" "Daniel Carter." "Daniel, I hear your farm's one of the hardest hit. We want to help." The barn quieted, all eyes turning. Grace held her breath. Daniel looked at the outstretched hand, then shook his head. "With all due respect, Mr. President, I don't want handouts. My family built this farm with our hands. I won't take charity." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Grace tugged his arm, cheeks flushed. But Daniel stood tall. "This isn't charity," Trump replied. "It's support. Farmers like you deserve it. I've heard promises before. Every election. But when the drought comes, when the bank threatens, when the land cries out, 'Where are they?' I don't want subsidies that vanish with the cameras. I want dignity. I want to stand on my own." The barn stilled. Some admired him. Others whispered uneasily. Trump's smile faded, then steadied. "You're a proud man. I respect that. But pride doesn't have to mean suffering." Daniel's jaw tightened. Suffering is better than owing. Trump gave a slow nod and said, "No more." Grace squeezed her father's hand. "Dad, please." He remained resolute. Then Melania stepped closer, her hand lightly resting on his arm. Her voice was soft but firm. "Mr. Carter, I admire your pride. It shows honor. But sometimes, accepting help isn't weakness. It's giving your children a future." Daniel looked into her eyes. For the first time in years, someone seemed to truly understand the burden he carried. Grace's eyes brimmed with tears. For months she had tried to tell her father the same thing, but hearing it from the First Lady seemed to pierce deeper. The barn was hushed. Every farmer and neighbor caught in the quiet exchange. Daniel's voice cracked. "I don't want to fail her. This farm is all we have left of our family. If I accept help, it feels like I'm admitting I couldn't protect what my father entrusted me with." Melania's smile was soft, her words gentle. Protecting her doesn't mean carrying the weight alone. True strength is born in love, not in pride. Daniel's throat tightened. He had no answer. For the first time, the moment wasn't about politics or programs, it was about humanity. Double quotes, Mrs. Trump, his voice trembled. "Every day I wake wondering if this will be the day we lose everything. I promised my wife before she passed that I would keep this farm alive for our daughter. If I accept help, it feels like breaking that promise." Melania's gaze softened further. "Promises aren't broken when you accept help. They're kept when you do whatever it takes to protect your family. Your daughter will not remember if you stood alone. She will remember that you fought for her future." Grace clutched her father's hand, whispering, "She's right, Dad." For the first time, Daniel's defenses wavered. The barn around them stayed silent, as if the entire community was holding its breath. And in that fragile moment, hope dared to enter. When the barn emptied, Melania quietly asked Daniel and Grace to walk with her outside. Away from cameras and chatter, the evening air felt like a reprieve. They strolled past the fields, the dry soil cracking under their boots. "I did not grow up with wealth," Melania said at last. Her eyes lingered on the horizon. "I know what it means to work hard and wonder if it will ever be enough. I know the value of dignity." Daniel said nothing. Grace watched him anxiously, praying he would listen. "Sometimes what we call help is not a gift," Melania continued. "It is an investment to your strength, into your family, into America's future. Farmers like you are not forgotten. You are honored." Her words sank deep. For years, Daniel had felt invisible, as if his struggles were just another forgotten story. Yet here was the First Lady, speaking as though his fight mattered beyond his own land. When Trump joined them, His voice was less commanding, more intent. "Daniel, I respect your refusal, truly. But this isn't about handouts. It's about making sure farmers like you don't stand alone." Daniel studied him. "With all due respect, sir, I've heard promises like that my whole life. Why should I believe this time is different?" Trump met his gaze squarely. "Because I'm not talking about numbers on a page. I'm talking about you, your daughter, and this land. You've already earned every bit of support. I'm not giving you anything you haven't worked for." Grace tightened her grip on her father's sleeve. "Dad, maybe it's not just about us. Maybe it's about everyone who depends on what we grow." Daniel exhaled. For the first time, he didn't feel like he was being sold another promise. He felt seen, and that realization unsettled him. That night, Daniel sat in silence on the porch, stars scattered faintly above. Grace rested her head on his shoulder. "You're quiet," she said softly. "I'm thinking." She hesitated. Mom used to say, "Pride can't feed the hungry, but love can." Maybe holding on to pride so tightly is costing us more than we realize. Daniel swallowed hard. His wife's voice echoed in his memory her wisdom, her faith in him. She had always said strength wasn't standing alone, but knowing when to lean on others. For years he had convinced himself he was honoring her by refusing help. Now he wondered if he had betrayed her hope instead. "Maybe you're right," he whispered. That night, long after Daniel fell asleep, Grace sat at the kitchen table with pen and paper. Carefully, she wrote a letter to the First Lady. She told of her father's struggles, his pride, and the weight he carried since her mother's passing. She ended with, "My dad is the strongest man I know. But even the strongest need someone to remind them they're not alone. Accepting help doesn't take away his dignity. It might save our future." She sealed the letter and passed it to a volunteer, praying it would reach Melania. A week later, as Daniel repaired a tractor, a black SUV pulled into the drive. A staff member stepped out and handed him an envelope. Puzzled, Daniel opened it. Inside was Grace's letter, and a handwritten note in Melania's elegant script. "Strength is not lost in receiving help, but gained in knowing your fight matters. Your family's story is America's story. Do not carry this alone." Daniel's hands trembled. Tears blurred the page. He looked at Grace, who stood nervously nearby. He began. She nodded. "I just wanted her to understand." Daniel didn't scold her. Instead, he pressed the letter to his chest. For the first time in years, he felt something he thought was gone forever hope that night. Daniel spread the letter across the kitchen table. Grace waited quietly. Finally, he said, "I can't do this alone anymore." That's all I wanted to hear. The next morning, Daniel made the call, but he made it on his terms. He didn't ask for money to patch his farm alone. He asked for resources to rebuild sustainably and to hire neighbors who had lost their land. It wasn't about saving himself any, more it was about lifting everyone. The officials agreed, impressed by his vision. And slowly, the Carter farm began to recover. New irrigation systems were installed. Seeds were planted again. Machinery roared back to life. Neighbors returned to the fields. What had once been silent now hummed with work, laughter, and life. Grace organized youth programs, teaching local kids about farming. The Carter farm became more than land, it became a symbol of renewal. Daniel, once the man who refused to bend, now stood as a leader of his community. Not because he had turned away help, but because he had accepted it with purpose and shared it generously. Pride no longer weighed him down, it lifted him up. Months later, when the President and First Lady returned, Daniel didn't linger at the back. He stood tall, handshake firm. "Mr. President, Mrs. Trump," he said, steady and sure. "Thank you for respecting us enough to let us choose how to use your help." Trump clapped him on the shoulder. "Daniel, you didn't just save your farm. You gave this town hope. That's leadership." Melania hugged Grace, whispering, "You are the reason your father's heart opened. Never forget the power of your voice." Grace beamed, pride shining through her tears. The air filled with music, roasted corn, and children's laughter. Stalls brimmed with produce and handmade goods. Families who had once lived in despair now celebrated abundance. Daniel stood with Grace, watching golden fields sway in the breeze. His chest swelled with a new kind of pride, not the kind that isolated him, but the kind that connected him to everyone around him. "You saved me, Grace," he whispered. She shook her head. No, Dad, you saved all of us because you chose love over pride. Tears welled in his eyes, but this time they were tears of gratitude. The farm wasn't just alive, it was thriving, and so was he. As the sun dipped below the horizon, painting the sky with crimson and gold, Daniel Carter finally understood. Strength had never meant carrying the burden alone. True strength was in community. True strength was in love. True strength was in knowing when to lay down pride for the sake of those you love most. Melania's words lingered in his mind. Strength is not lost in receiving help. Grace slipped her hand into his. Mom would be proud of you, Dad. Daniel looked over the fields, his heart full. The land would endure, but more than that, so would the lessons of humility, hope, and courage. And in that quiet golden moment, he knew. His story belonged to everyone who dared to hope.